what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight series presented by the Black Podcasters Association. My name is Corey Gums. I'm the founder, and tonight I'm your host. Uh, just to give you guys some background, the Spotlight series is a weekly show where we highlight Black podcasters, creatives, and podcast support professionals from our online community. Our goal is to bring the spotlight to all of our members and help raise awareness of their unique journeys in this growing medium. In today's episode, we'd like to welcome the Field Goals for the Focus Driven Athlete podcast host, Glenn Hames, or Hames, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
you got it.
Um, Glenn's inspiration for his podcast comes from the experience and knowledge he acquired while being a parent of a D1 student athlete and the process of what it takes for amateur athletes to achieve their goal of playing sports at the highest level of their career. Glenn believes that if you have career goals, relationship goals, and financial goals, athletes should have athletic goals. Hence the tagline for a show: "New season, new goals. What's your field goals?" Which I love that when I first saw it. So, without further delay, I'm going to give you guys Glenn Hames. I'm going to let you talk about his podcast journey, and the successes he has since he's launched. So, how you doing tonight, Glenn? Glad to have you.
Corey, doing well, man. I appreciate that. Just super excited about being on the spotlight. I really appreciate all that you're doing for podcasters out there, particularly Black podcasters. I could not have experienced the success that I've had without you and your help and the help of the group. It's just been a great journey so far, and I'm really excited about the future.
I'm glad to have you, and I know we met each other through you needed some helps, and then we've been getting to know each other for the past couple of months now. And I guess let's start with your podcast. Like, just tell us what you're doing, what it's about, how you got started, how long you've been doing it.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. The name of the podcast is called Field Goals for the Focus Driven Athlete. And I'm new to the podcasting world. I just launched the podcast in September, right after Labor Day, because I wanted the podcast to correspond with the start of the fall sports season. And so I came up with this idea actually about 2 years ago, 2019. And you're right. The journey was I got this idea because of the inspiration from my son. My son was fortunate enough to play Division I football at Marshall University. Got a full scholarship playing for them. And when we were going through that process, at the time we were living in Washington D.C. And when we were going through that process, I had no clue about what to do, about how to get started, how to help him be successful in going through this journey, how to understand the process of, getting a scholarship, what type of camps to go through, what type of off-season training, who to train, what he should be working on, his diet. And just fortunately for us living in the DC area, there's a plethora of, former professional athletes, training facilities. And I was able just to network and meet a few people, and the next thing I know, my whole world opened up to the professional world, athletic world, and not just for football. I'm talking about football, basketball, baseball. Didn't matter. And even with my son's school, when he was in, he actually started getting looked at when he was in middle school, and by the time we got to high school, we started 2 years in DC public schools, and then we made the transfer to the private schools, and that's where the real competition was at. And like I said, from there, that's where the journey began. My network started expanding, met a lot of people that helped me through the process, and so I would just start kind of thinking about, what if I compiled all that information and just kind of put it in my first initial was, to put it into a book. Because I would always have his friends or his, parents to say, what are you doing for your son? I see he's experiencing some success. I'm clueless. And particularly for those that were single parents, mothers didn't know what to do. They just had, hey, my son's talented in basketball, my son's talented in football or baseball or track, but I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to help them. And they're at the mercy of their high school coach. And let me tell you, Corey, high school coaches, there's good ones, and then there's bad ones. I don't care, even if they are successful. I learned that, some high school coaches are just selfish and can be all about them. And, those are the things I had to combat because they were just in it for, them, to get the wins, not necessarily to help the athlete or the amateur athlete to be successful or get to the next level. So I had to be very strategic um, in that process of work, of how to select what to even type of schools and the coaches I was going to influence them. So anyway, I did all of that, and that's how I came up with the idea 2 years later in 2019 when I moved to North Carolina, and I would see other amateur athletes, young kids, and I'm talking about like seventh, eighth, ninth graders, that I could look at them and say, they got that it factor, and I want to talk to their parents and I say, hey, I think you should groom your son or your daughter in this particular sport. And a lot of those kids are, in high school now and doing extremely well. And so I just kind of started putting some ideas to paper, and started kind of playing around with the name a little bit. And initially, the podcast was going to be called Field Goals for the Driven and Focused Athlete. And then when I pitched it to my son, he absolutely loved it, but said, Dad, you should change it to Field Goals for the Focused Driven Athlete, not the Driven and Focused Athlete. So I had to credit him for the name change. And I pitched it to my wife now because my wife played Division I basketball in college as well. And she was telling me about her journey. And she said, hey, I grew up in New Jersey. My parents didn't know the first thing about the process of trying to help me get an athletic scholarship. So she was at the mercy of her high school coach. And just coincidentally, she had a good one. And she had several offers. And she chose, American University to go play for them. But again, thinking about parents and thinking about kids and, just this whole process, it's a tangled web, that you have to untangle. You have to be almost kind of in the right networks to be able to get the right information, because otherwise you can burn through cash, you can burn through, wasted time, and you can go through this process and not necessarily experience the type of success that you should experience or that your child deserves to experience. So you have to be very strategic in this. And again, I think my network, and I just had to be a little business savvy, and that's how this launched. So I started off actually, Corey, launching the social media platforms first, and then when COVID hit, I was like, oh, this would be a perfect time to launch the podcast. And then, with just all the crazy things that was happening in the country during that particular time, I got delayed and it got delayed. And then finally I said to myself, hey, you know what? I got this equipment here. Let me start looking at it, playing around with it, learning it. And then I just made the decision to launch in the fall. But the good thing is that in that 2-year span from the time I conceptualized the idea until launch, I was writing shows. I was writing topics. I was online because I had the social media platform, and so I wanted to continue to build that social media community and just put information out there. And that's how we initially grew. It's just through the social media platforms. I was on, I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group page, and I created a Instagram page, and I just constantly put information out there. And so I have to mine for that type of data online, and I'm always looking through, different social media. I'm Googling different, just different types of words, just to, from amateur athletes, just to see what information is out there. And man, there's a whole lot of stuff that's out there that talks about, different types of topics, and that's where I get my ideas from. But I felt like the more and more I pitched this idea of the Field Goals platform, the more confirmation I got to do it from a lot of family and friends, because there's nothing out there that's like this. I mean, when you think about podcasts or even, athletic talking shows, it's all geared towards professional athletes.
Right.
There's nothing geared towards the amateur athletes. And for me, my market is high school and college. So we focus primarily on 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, and as well as college athletes also. But
Oh, wow. Okay.
so I don't shows are not quite designed for those kids that are playing t-ball.
No, it's interesting how like your path into your podcast is not the conventional story that we hear a lot of people, right? And
Hmm.
I also think it's interesting that your audience your ideal audience, right, that you're targeting is not the normal audience that most people like. Most adults target adults, right? We target people in our age groups or around the same types of things that we do. So yours is more like the middle school, high school, those kids that are doing that transition, getting into sports. um how has the response been there for you? Because that's just a different audience, and that's now a new market that's starting to open up, and it's catching fire in the podcasting industry. The youth is like one of the fastest growing audiences. How is that translated for you?
Oh, it's been good. Now, I'll admit, when I came to North Carolina, I fell back on a profession that I did when I first started my career. I mean, I'm in business development now, but I used to be a teacher, and so when I came to North Carolina, before I got back into my career, I actually taught for like a year and a half, taught math, right?
Okay.
And so, and I was again divine intervention. I was at a really good school where these kids were good academically and athletically. But I saw the tide rising with a couple of kids that I was like, these kids are going to go far in this particular sport. It was about five of them. I mean, others were playing good, but there was about five kids that I saw that I was like, they got elite potential. And this was like in baseball. I remember a kid in soccer. Another one that played football, and I was like, they got it. And
Right.
I actually pitched field goals to them, and these were 11, 12-year olds, 13-year olds. You know what I mean? And they immediately got it. I actually pitched the idea to their parents, and they were like, "Do it, yeah! Like, let us know when it's launched, so we can support it." Because again, everybody had the same story. We don't
Right.
know how to support our child. We don't know how to.
Right.
We don't know the
Most parents aren't
steps.
athletes. Most
Right.
parents
We don't know how to do it. So the podcast is geared for both the amateur athlete, but also mostly for the parent or for a coach as well, because my market of audience teller in my shows is we help amateur athletes, coaches, and teams achieve their on and off the field athletic goals.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because I know the other part that's amazing. So basically what you did was you validated your idea, right? You validated your idea before you started recording. You was like, let me just pitch this around inside the people who I'm going to be targeting, see their response. And with every pitch, you got the validation saying, you know what, this is needed. This is what we want. Thank you. Basically, thank you for doing this, because there's nothing out
Yeah.
here. I don't know what to do. However, you started with the community first. So let's talk about that. So you decided to go with the community, and then it's almost like the podcast is kind of like a tool to support the community versus building the community. Like, I know you've heard me say this in the group and everything, build your community around your podcast, build it, but you kind of flipped it and did it the other way around. How was that experience for you, and how does your podcast fit into the community that you built versus how I would say you build a community around your podcast?
It actually worked out well because by the time I launched the podcast, I probably had about close to 1,000 subscribers throughout my social media channels.
Okay.
Okay, so when I launched, in my mind, is like I'm gonna automatically have 1,000 listeners. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's how I was thinking. Again, I'm new to this whole podcasting thing, so I didn't know what to do. I'm just using some business savvy sense of what I think that makes sense.
Right.
So I said, before I can get the podcast going, let me build the community, and that's what I did. And so now in my community, it's mostly there's a few amateur athletes, but it's mostly um, parents um, of athletes, as well as former professional athletes. And we got former professional athletes who played baseball, football, and basketball, and a few people that did well in track and field too. So I'm glad about that. I don't necessarily promote who those people are because I don't
Right.
want them to get inundated, from other people. But they do chime in and give good opinions. So I built the community on Facebook. I have a Facebook page for Field Goals. I have a Facebook group page for Field Goals, and I have an Instagram page for Field Goals. And that's how I started. I now have a Twitter as well for Field Goals too. So once I launched the podcast, obviously I promoted it all on my social media platforms, um, and now I'm sure, as you know, with Facebook, you can on your business page, you
Right.
can attach your podcast on that. So now all those people that follow me, they can not only hear the podcast on my platforms, my podcast platforms, but they can also get an update or an alert when it comes through the Facebook page too.
Okay. I think for you, I know that you just said you're on Twitter now. I think one of the tools, and this is something we're gonna probably do inside the group as well, or what our new series that we're doing. But I've been investigating Twitter Spaces, and I think for somebody like you, where you're talking about student athletes, and this is something that both retired or past professional athletes, as well as parents and students, can engage in the Twitterverse. That would be a great tool for what you're doing as well. So you might want to look into that. But I think
Yes.
what's the question
Mhm.
I have for you too is like, so what if I listen to your podcast? If my son is 14, he keeps going back and forth between football and basketball, drives me up the wall. But I'm like, you got to make a decision, man. Time is not on your side. But
Actually, Corley, I'm sorry to interrupt. Actually, that's a good thing, being a multi-sport athlete, and I'm going to do a show on that too. But go ahead.
he's not playing both sports. He's going back and forth between which one he wants. It was whatever.
Oh,
We can talk
okay.
about that later. But
Yeah.
if I was to listen to the podcast, or if I was to have him listen to the podcast, what would we expect to hear? What because I know I love the name. When I heard it, I was like, that's perfect. Field goals. It's a double entendre, right? Field goals for the focus driven athlete. I was like, that's a wonderful, that's great. If you're an athlete or you're into sports, it should click automatically.
Mhm.
Even if you're just a regular Joe Schmo.
Mhm.
But what should we expect? Like, is it the process of just understanding how to make goals for yourself, or performance goals, or anything like that, or is it a variety of different types of information I can get from the
Yeah, good
podcast?
question. It's actually a variety of information that you can get. So what I do is I go out and I get subject matter experts. I'm not the expert. I'm just the host, and I
Right.
interview people on the topics that we select for that particular show. So I launched my show, and it's bi-weekly. I have bi-weekly shows
Okay.
because it's too much to do every week. For those that can do it, hey man, you got my full respect. But so I do my shows bi-weekly. Um, and I find subject matter experts that can talk about that particular topic. So if you click on my either my website, or you're on Spotify or Apple Pods, and you see field goals, you're going to see different various types of topics. So for an example, the very first show that we did was training for perfect performance. And so the guy that I have that I'm talking to is actually a former NFL player, played in the NFL for quite some time, and he was part of my network. And he has a very great training facility in the Northern Virginia area, right outside of Washington D.C. And he and his staff were instrumental in training my son in football. Now, they train other athletes as well:
Mhm.
football, basketball, baseball. They're big on lacrosse and soccer. It's a massive facility. So think about a warehouse that's been converted into a training facility. It's massive, very professional, right? And so I said, hey, since we're starting off the podcast in correlation to the sports season, the biggest thing is that you, as an athlete, you want to stay on the field and play, or stay on the court and play. You can't get any shine if
Right.
you are injured. And so we wanted to talk about how to train your body for perfect performance in order to be injury free and to be able to sustain your body through the lengthy sports season. And
Okay.
so that's the topic we came up with. Now, second topic was about goal setting. So people needed to understand, who we are as a brand, the importance of athletes being able to set goals and how to set specific athletic goals. Okay, and so um, I got my guest is actually a coach, certified coach. And I don't mean a coach like in sports, but a motivational type of coach in goal setting.
Okay.
And so I got her to be able to come on to be able to talk about um, goal setting and how to be specific in goal settings and how to take steps in order to achieve your goals. So those are just two examples about what you will see when you click on the link.
Okay. Um, and I know you say you get searched. So how do you go about getting the guests? Because I know we have people watching. That's a question that comes up a lot for podcasters in various different groups and stuff like that. And people have different approaches about how they do it. But how do you find your what is it? How do you find your guests? Because I know, especially in the sports, and the more popular person is, or they had careers and stuff, it's kind of hard to get for some people to take you serious, right? Like, you might be just trying to pitch them for whatever. How do you go about getting your guests? Like, how do you get them to say, hey, you know what? I want to be on this show.
Excellent question, Corey. So I first started off with my network. So
Okay.
my personal network, again, I thought about the people that helped me through this particular process. And in all honesty, I've been talking to them about launching field goals as well, between 2019 until actually when I actually launched. And so I was already probing a couple of my guests at that particular time. I was like, listen, when I launch, I want you to be on my show. Okay. I want you to be on my show. And they were like, absolutely. And so the first two guests, I I had a personal relationship with them. But again, they were subject matter experts. You know,
All right.
I know a lot of professional people, but everybody doesn't make the cut to be on the show. So one, I use my network. And two, I think about, well, here's the thing. Let me back up. Here's where my business development um,
Comes
savviness
in there.
comes
Right.
into play. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So naturally, I mean, my background, I've been, a networker for a long time for various companies. So I'm not afraid to ask people to cold market, the cold call. So I use my warm market of people who I know, but I also use cold market. And so a couple of things. One, I start off with my warm market
Hmm.
and I ask them. I had to build a pipeline because my shows are bi-weekly. So I do not want to be able to, I don't want to get caught out there doing a week and I don't have a guest.
Right.
So once I have a guest, like, so for example, when I launched episode 1, I already had a guest for episode 2 and 3.
Okay.
When I did episode 2, I already had my guest lined up for episode 3 and 4. When I did, episode 3, I already had my guests for 4, 5, and 6. So right now, my shows are booked through February or March of 2022
Wow.
already. Okay. I
Okay.
have to build that pipeline
All right.
consistently because I don't want to get caught in a situation where it's the week of recording and I'm still scrambling trying to find someone. And I write my shows out. Okay. So I start off by asking people who I know, because you had to think about other people's schedule and their time because it may not fit. When I might want them to do a show, it may not work for them. So I got to be able to say, hey, I got to build it out to say this is your time, okay, or the month or where I want you to do it. So I give them far enough advance notice so that they can clear their calendar.
Right.
So I use my warm market. I also use a cold market, and then I also use referrals. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm constantly talking to people and asking them, who do they know? Lastly, if you listen to my show, I do a segment at the end called Quick Hitters. Uh, and the last question, and everybody should be familiar with Quick Hitters. It's, I'm asking a couple of fun questions. I make, after a topic that we discuss, play a game, Quick Hitters, and we go through that. But the last question I always ask is, what's a topic that you would like for us to talk about on field goals, and who do you know would
Oh, that's
be
great.
perfect to talk about it? And I say this, but here's the disclaimer: you got to help me get that person on the show.
Oh,
Okay, they
that's
don't know
dope.
I'm going to ask that.
Okay.
They don't know I'm going to
I
ask
like that
that.
idea, man. That's
Yeah,
a great idea.
yeah. So
Because
I'm
you get
constantly
the
building my
content,
pipeline.
so you don't even have to chase down content because they're helping you provide the content, and then they're helping you get in the guests to help you with the content.
Right.
The
So
Jedi
now,
mind tricks.
exactly. So, and here's the last thing, Corey. So here's point number 5. So I use let me just go over this one more time. I use my warm market, people I
Uh-huh.
know. I use a cold market sometimes because let me tell you, I got a guest that's going to come on for episode 9. I don't know him, but I actually have followed him on his social media platform well over a year ago, and this guy is doing phenomenal. I actually just DM'd him on Facebook, and I was like, "Listen, this is what I got going on. Would you like to be a part of this podcast?" And he DM'd me back and said, "Absolutely." And then we talked on the phone, and we had a good conversation. And he's like, "Yo, when can I come on?" And so he's gonna be my guest for episode 9. And this guy played Division 1 football, played in the NFL, and he's going to talk about the recruiting process for football only. So we're not a sports specific show, but on some topics we will be. But so let me get back to how I built my pipeline: warm market, cold market, and then I go through my warm market. I go through their warm market. Cold market, I go through their warm market. I ask the question on the show, um, and then what was the last point? I asked the question on the show, and then that's how I always consistently build my pipeline.
That's dope. I like that idea. I mean,
Appreciate that.
it's so simple, and it's and it's how you do it. It's just so subtle. It's like, wow, I get the content and I get the guest, and I don't
Exactly,
have to go
man. And I hold
chasing
them
out.
to that.
I might have to do some follow up and stuff, but I don't have to. It's not like me sitting here like, okay, how am I going to get this person? I thought I
No.
put my little pipeline for this show, but now I'm like, I got to do a little bit better.
Yeah. No, man. And let me tell you, and this is how I stay organized. I have a podcast calendar book that allows me so it's like a book that goes through. It's a planner where
Right.
you can write out your first 100 shows. Now, obviously, I don't have my first 100 shows written out, but I can flip through my book and see exactly where I am. Like I said, through the first quarter almost of 2022.
Okay.
Okay, so I write their names in, and I periodically, send them reminders like, "Hey, we've got some time, but your show is coming up in about 6 weeks." You know what I mean? So make sure you put it, continue to keep us on your calendar so you don't forget.
Yeah.
So I have to keep reminding them like, we
Right.
just finished this particular episode. You got about 4 weeks, and I'm going to be coming to you for this.
Okay.
Yep.
That's dope. So I know you pressed for time. I'm just gonna ask a couple more questions and then we'll
Yeah,
wrap
we're
up. But
good. Go ahead.
I definitely want to offer you an invitation. We did the Podchaser episode the other day. One of the things I want to try to do with that series is bring people in with different skill sets and have them talk about tools or their school skill sets. I think networking, just having this conversation with you, we don't really talk about networking in the capacity in which you said how you get your guests going. I would like to extend you an invitation. You can think about it. You don't have to answer now,
Sure.
but maybe one day you could come on and we can actually just focus on a particular episode where we just talk about networking and building a pipeline and the tricks and the tips and stuff like that, because I suck at networking and I've always sucked at it because I've never been taught how to do it right. I've only done it how I know how to do it. But
Right.
I think
Right.
it would be seeing how you use it to help you keep your guest pipeline going in advance. I think that's a trick that a lot of podcasters need to learn and understand. And I don't know if you saw the comment earlier, but one of our Latoya, one of our viewers commented earlier and said, like, you should write a book that about what you saw how you were saying you were going to write a book first. She said a book would be nice. So I think that would
Yeah,
be a great way for you to repurpose what you're doing at
absolutely.
some point. But of course, that takes time.
Absolutely. Well, Corey, that's why I need to get incorporate show notes into my podcast, so I don't
Okay.
have to organically come out of my head. I can just use the content from the podcast and take bits and pieces out of it to put in the book. But that's the long term goal for me.
Yeah. Well, we have plenty of people in the group that are really professional. Actually, because like you, and one of the questions I did want to ask you is, what is one thing in 2022? What is one goal you've set for yourself for 2022 for your podcast?
Great question. So, couple of things. One, I need to build a better website that can host the podcast as well. Two, I want to go ahead and get into some merchandise, field goals for the Focus Driven Athlete merchandise, because I want to be able to give my guests merchandise for them to wear, to be able to promote. And for elite athletes, I want to be able to give them some gear that they can wear that says, "Hey, I'm a focused, driven athlete." So that's those are two main goals.
It's three.
Get better with marketing in my social media,
Okay.
and I, just like everyone else, monetize.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you do this, you do the gear and stuff, and you the book and all that stuff. That's part of the whole package deal. So
Yeah.
monetization, and I think for what you're doing, if you keep at the pace you're going, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities from companies and stuff like that, for you to do that. And you can really, you have the privilege of being able to focus on specific types of products and stuff because you have a very specific niche that you can target. So I think that's a great idea. I asked that because you mentioned show notes. One of the plans for the group for Black Podcast Association, and one of our goals next year is to start doing more trainings and stuff like show notes and stuff like that. And we have a lineup of people who are really good at this stuff in line, waiting just for me to say, "Here's the date, let's go." So it's going to be there. Of course, it's something that takes practice, myself included. I'm not the best with show notes.
Right.
It's just you just got to keep doing it. But I like the idea of taking show notes and repurposing it and using that to help with a book. I know I use some of the posts from the group to help me with my presentation that I did earlier today with teenagers and podcasting. So it definitely helps a whole lot. But I wanted to also ask if there was one thing you could, what was a mistake that you made that you learned a lesson from starting your podcast during this
I
journey?
did. Oh, that's the easy one. I didn't batch my podcast together when I launched, and I didn't realize that how unique a strategy that could be in the beginning, until after I launched my podcast. So I grew my podcast, episode by episode, brick by brick. If I could have done it all over again, I would have had 3 to 5 shows already done and launched it with those 3 to 5 shows. And let me give you an example why. Because my first episode, surprisingly, in 2 days, amassed over 100 downloads.
Wow.
It's crazy, and I was like, oh my goodness, And so imagine if I already would have had 3, 4, 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Those same listeners would have probably have listened to those episodes at that particular time as well. Which goes back to a question that you asked me, Corey, again about building my how do I build my network or my guests, is because now that the word is starting to really get out and people are hearing it, I've got people now calling me or emailing me saying, "I know someone that would be great for your show." You see what I'm saying?
Right. So
Because
it works for itself at this point.
correct. And I got to get it to that point where it continues. But there's a lot of things I have to do to get organized, because here's another problem that I run into now when people do that, is that they are looking. Remember, the mission behind the podcast is to help amateur athletes, coaches, and teams achieve their on and off the field athletic goals. Okay. And I have to even tell my guests that I have, you got to keep that in mind when you're talking. This podcast is not about you. So if you play a professional sport, I'm gonna give you a chance to shine. If you're an author, I'm gonna give you a chance to shine. If you run your own training facility, I'm gonna give you a chance to shine and promote yourself. But the podcast, the episode is not about you and what you do. Okay.
Right.
It's about the knowledge that you have that you can give that's going to help, an athlete or coach or team achieve their goal. And so that's how I have to structure my shows. And I have to make people that. So I say that because I get people who want to come on, but I can tell that they want to come on
to promote,
to talk about themselves,
You know,
right?
I like the fact that you're very explicit about that, because one of the things I teach clients is like, first thing I do is your message, right? Your message is the foundation, or you called it the mission. So the message, right? The message, you want to have the out your mission is the outcome of your message, right? I'm glad you stick to that. And that's something I drive home is like, if your content is not in line with your mission, it's not in line with the outcomes you want for your podcast or the episode, then you need to put it to the side and go back
Hmm.
and figure out how to get that content. That also includes your guests. Just because somebody has a name or did something does not mean that they're in line with your podcast. Does not mean that what they're coming on there to say is going to bring value to your listeners on that podcast. So I'm glad you stressed that. That's one of the
That
things
is
that I
correct.
tell you with this show, I say, hey, this is about you. And you talk about you. It's not about bringing all this other stuff into it and all of that. It's let's just focus on you, what you're
Hmm.
doing, what you're trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
I'm glad, and I really want people that are watching and listening to understand what Glenn said. That is important. That you make sure that your guests know that what their purpose and what their reason and who they are there for. They're there for your listeners, not for themselves, unless that's the platform you're giving them.
Right.
Right, but if you're like if you're very focused on getting a particular message across, then you have to be clear. And if they're not in line with that, you don't have to be mean about it, but you can gracefully say, thank you, but maybe this time is not good enough, whatever, blah blah blah, and let them keep seeing the growth of the show, so they understand that you can't come on here with that.
That's
The,
correct.
the Black Panther meme, like, nah, we don't do that here, right?
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
so I think that's really good. I mean, you dropped some gems, and I don't think people hear it. I'm listening to you talk about how you handled your podcast, and I'm like, this is what I'm trying to. This is what I teach people. So I'm like, the message, making sure you stay on task with your client, batch recording, all these things that keep you efficient and keep the pressure off of you so that you don't feel overwhelmed. So I respect that, man. And
Yeah, I
I mean,
appreciate
we've
that.
come a long way since you first launched. I remember when you first got, helping you with the roadcaster and stuff, and then you hit the ground running. You're like, yeah, I'm going to do this in 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, okay, you
Yeah.
know. So I'm proud of what you're doing. I'm glad to hear that you're building it. I'm a member of your group. We're gonna definitely get into how people can reach out to you and stuff like that. But
Sure.
I do ask everybody this question. What does it mean for you to be a Black podcaster and to be a member of the Black Podcasters Association?
Wow, man. Let me tell you. First of all, being a podcaster, um, it's a goal that was achieved, Corey. Like I said, when I came up with the idea, it was 2 years ago. But to be able to launch now, and to have the level of success that I have, it's really good because I see big things with it.
Right.
And again, everybody that I talk to, is like, you got something here. Like, you really got something here. And so that makes me feel great that I was able to, organically jump into this whole podcasting pool and make a name for myself. And I know podcasting is now starting to become a little bit more popular, but I'm glad that I got in at the time that I got in. Being a part of the Black Podcasting Association, it's like family. I mean, when I feel like I've been knowing you for a long time, honestly.
Right.
And I'm a part of a lot of other podcasting groups that have thousands of members in it. I don't necessarily participate in those as much as I participate in the Black Podcasting Association groups,
Mhm.
and that, I just feel a little bit more comfortable here. And when you have that family feel, that brings on on a sense of comfort, where I can ask certain questions. And I'm not saying that I don't feel uncomfortable in other groups that I'm in, but I probably participate more in this group than I do in the other groups, because I feel like everybody is trying to learn at the same time. So it's an awesome community. I actually invited about 3 people to the group myself, and they've jumped in, and I'm glad to see that is growing. I think what you're doing here. In fact, I'll say this: with this particular group, I don't see any other group that has taken it to the level that I feel like you and others have taken this group to, being able to promote your show. And I know that those groups are probably, filled with thousands and thousands of people. So they probably can't do, um, everything that you're doing here. But
Right.
I absolutely love it. I love it a lot.
Thank you. That means a lot, man. everybody that comes on here and tells me what the group means to them. It's inspirational for me because sometimes, as you know, you run your own community. Sometimes it takes a lot,
Takes a lot.
and it takes a lot of energy and time and money, and it's just like, some days you just wake up like, I can't do this anymore. So
Yeah.
it means a lot to me.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have all of you guys a part of it because I'm also learning. I've learned a lot from having you guys in the group. Just for me not getting myself wrapped up in myself when it comes to podcasting. Because sometimes you think I know the answer, and it's like you're just starting to see how everybody's achieving their levels of success by forging their own path and just learning that the lessons that they learn and just seeing everybody share. So it's a great experience to have you guys a part of the community. I'm glad to have you. I've learned a lot. Even you just the questions you ask me, sometimes you don't think about it and like, you know what, that's a really great question. I gotta go look up some answers or talk to some people so I can make sure I give you the right answer.
Right.
Um, so it keeps me on my game. So I really appreciate that, man. If you could give one piece of advice to the people who are watching, who out there that are looking to start a podcast or maybe struggling, what would be one piece of advice you give them?
The biggest advice that I can give that I can think of is feel the fear, but do it anyway. Corey, you probably don't realize this, but and it's going to sound odd. I'm an extrovert. I've spoken in front of large groups of people. I have no problem, meeting and networking people. But when it came down, one of the biggest delays in my podcast was fear. Um, your mind start playing a lot of tricks on you. I started having a lot of doubts, and even now, sometimes I still have a few doubts.
Mhm.
Um, and I never forget, I the first step of me conquering my fear of doing the podcast, and I had the equipment. But I was making a lot of excuses, and I felt like I needed to learn everything about the Roadcaster and all of that, first before I could launch. But I also was like, time is just moving. I'm wasting so much time, and so when you and I met online, I needed help. And I needed to expedite that time because I just knew I couldn't do it all the time, do it all by myself.
Right.
That one session that you had with me, and you actually forced me, you said, hit the record button. I didn't want to hit the record button because I was nervous. I was scared. You didn't know that, but I actually was. But you gave me a sense of comfort to say, okay, I got someone here with me. I'm going to hit the record button. And we recorded for like 30, 40 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
And we just kind of talked on it. And that's how I was able to get
Wow.
comfortable with recording. So the biggest advice that I can tell people who are looking to start a podcast, you know, it's good to have everything written out and planned, but you don't move the needle until you hit record, you know.
Right.
So um it's like people who say, hey, I want to start a business, but they feel like they got to do all the organizations first. And that's not saying that's important, but that's not the work. The
Right.
work comes in once you get started.
Yeah.
So just get started.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, that's amazing. I didn't even know, man. Like you just boss. I was like, really? Because I was just telling you hit the record so we could just test it out.
Dude, I didn't want to do
Just to make sure
it.
everything was working. See, it's funny how things are though, right? So I'm on this side, like, yeah, just hit record. 'Cause let's just make sure it works before you go and do this. And you're up here going through your, whatever it is you're going through, and it's like, wow, and that's interesting because sometimes you don't know what people are going through. We're
That's
sitting here
right.
talking and you don't realize what they're going through. So that's gonna be something I put in my back pocket to think about when I talk to people in the group or I just have a general conversation about podcasting is I have to be more aware that this person on this side that I'm talking to might really be might be in a complete standstill because they don't know what to do or whatever. So that's some great advice, man. Now you're gonna have me sitting here thinking about this all night because I remember the conversation. To me, it was like nothing. I hear telling me like, "Yo, I was scared." I was like, I had fear. I won't say scared. You was fearful.
No, I had fear.
And
I
I
was
was like,
scared. Yeah, I was
just
like,
pressing that button, just that little green red button,
that's right.
it's like so wow. You threw me a loop tonight, man. Thank you. But I know it's Friday night and you got things to
No,
do and stuff
it's
like
all
that.
good. This is fun for me, man. I can talk
All
all
right.
night.
But let's talk about how people can get in touch with you. How can if there are parents that out here that have children, like how can they join your community and stuff? I have the banner set up, so I'll just you run down a list and I'll show them for the viewers. So
Yeah, sure thing. The thing too, Corey, that I've noticed is that even with those that don't have kids, their nieces, they have nieces, they have
right.
nephews, they have cousins. And so I've had people to say, I don't have kids that play sports, but I can follow your show. It just makes so much sense. But I have family members, so I have friends that I think that would be beneficial, and they pass it on to them. So even in my audience, it's not everybody that is a parent of a child that's playing sports. They
Mhm.
may be a friend, a godmother, godfather, an aunt, uncle, niece, nephew that they may have
I want to
that are
interrupt
playing.
you real quick. 'Cause
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
gonna look at the camera. Viewers, you hear what he said. It's the value. It brings the value that people feel that other people can benefit from. So the content brings the value. So please, when you're thinking about your content, think about the value. Not only that, it might not even be just the listener that you're talking to directly, but they might know somebody else that they say, you know what, they really can value from this, right? So that's a good
Hmm.
promotion tool as well. So take that feedback you get and really embrace that, because that's really big. That's how organic. That's how, that's organic growth right there.
That's right.
And really encourage them to share it. Like, when people take, please make sure you get it in their hands. So that, I think, you dropped a lot of gems. I don't think you meant to, or just your journey just shows you like a little, like those little things that people really need to do to reach those goals that they have for their podcasting. So you might have to do field goals for the focus driven podcasters, or
you
pod
know,
goals for the focus driven podcaster. There you
yeah,
go.
yeah. Get some podcast that goes. Sure thing. You can follow me. I am on Facebook. My Facebook page is Field Goals. Okay,
Oh, it's field
that's
goals.
well, yeah. Well, no, you can do it. It's
Or it
fine.
comes
Yeah,
up, it comes up as my field goals.
that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
for the Facebook page. Yeah,
yeah.
for the Facebook group page, which is completely separate. That is the whole name: Field Goals for the Focused Driven Athlete. I have it set up where if you like my field goals page, I can send you an invite to the field goals group page, okay, Facebook group page.
All right.
All right. Um, for I'm on Instagram, it's at my field goals, okay. But you again, even on Instagram, you can search for field goals and it's going to come up.
Mhm.
And for Twitter, you can search for field goals and it's going to come up as at my field goals as well. And I'm new to Twitter. I'm teaching myself to Twitter. So at the end of my show, I'm always telling, hey, subscribe to us on Twitter. So I'm trying to get good at tweeting. So I've been on Twitter for barely a month.
I've resurrected I've gone back on Twitter the past couple of days. I think I'm starting to understand how to use Twitter. I mean, I know how to use Twitter, but like how to use the ecosystem in Twitter and engage with people. And so far, we've been getting really the past couple of days, we some real good engagement. So we're gonna do something on that too. So a
Yes.
lot of these things where, like I see what you guys say in the group. Don't think that I'm not out there like, I gotta find somebody that this is a really good question. And if he's having this problem or she's having that problem, that means other people are having that problem. I gotta find somebody that can help with this. So we're gonna be talking about that. So hopefully you and I next 2022, our
Yeah.
Twitter goals we're gonna reach our Twitter goals. So
Right. Right.
but you also have a website, right? myfieldgoals.com.
Yeah, so I actually purchased a domain name because I wanted to get that before anybody snatched it up. It's
Another gem, people. Another gem.
www.myfieldgoals.com. Now, that that website is going to just take you directly to the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on all the major podcast platforms. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Pods, we're on Google Pods, all the major ones. But if if you have a parent or someone that's not on podcast, because I actually have relatives that say, hey, I don't have any podcast apps on my phone, how can I hear your show? It's www.myfieldgoals.com. You can click that link and it's going to automatically direct you to the episodes that I have. Okay. Now, once I build out my webpage the way I really, really want it, then
Mhm.
it'll be a lot more robust.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. So we're gonna wrap up. Really appreciate having you here. It was a pleasure talking to you. I'm glad to see you, your podcast has grown since you launched.
Thank you, man.
I'm excited to see your continued growth. I'm excited to see what you're gonna do in 2022.
Yeah.
So make sure you guys check out Field Goals for the Focus Driven Athlete. As we learned that there's some gems in there that may not be necessarily you might learn from. It's geared towards athletes, the student athletes, but you might actually learn something for yourself. So make sure you check it out. It's on all major platforms. Thank you, Glenn, again for being here. I'm just gonna do closing arguments is like I'm a lawyer. Closing statement. Thank you guys for checking out the spotlight. Make sure you tune into our show next Tuesday. We do this every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern and every Friday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you check it out. If you're in the group and if you're a member in the group and you want to be on here, hit me up in the group. I'll get you on here. We'll schedule you. We have a bunch of open slots in January, February. So make sure you get them because they go really, really fast. So next week, next Tuesday, we're actually going to have at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're going to spotlight our next Black podcast member, Sharifa Hardy. She's host of the Roundtable Talk Show. So we're going to learn more about what she does in her show. But if you'd like to join our group, if you'd like to get on the spotlight, make sure you come onto Facebook, join our online community. It's the Black Podcasters Association. That's our official Facebook. You can also check the links in our bio or in our description, depending on what platform you're viewing this. Also, you can go to our website, blackpodcastersassociation.com, to learn more about what we do, as well as sign up for our newsletter. So, again, thank you, Glenn. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe out there, and have a good evening.
Hey, Corey, real quick.
Yes, sir.
New episode drops next Thursday. Episode 8.
So when do you episode 8 drops next Thursday? You typically drop a episode on Thursdays, or
every Thursday, every second Thursday,
every
other Thursday. Excuse me. Yeah.
Okay. Then because you do it bi-weekly.
Yeah, I do it bi-weekly. Yes.
Okay.
Every other Thursday.
All right, guys. So y'all heard it. Episode 8. Make sure you check that out, and it drops every Glenn's episodes drop every other Thursday. So mark it on your calendar, and I'll definitely check you next week, next Tuesday when we have our next guest on the show. So again, everyone, have a good night. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Corey.